Now, what I'd like to do this evening is to give you something of a potted history of ghost fishing UK, introduce you to the basic concepts of what ghost fishing is, and talk about how we're operating at the moment, and then perhaps at the end of it, discuss some ways that you could get involved in the work that we do. As we've said, I'm more than happy if you want to fire in questions. I'm quite happy to be interrupted and indulge the questions. And at the end, I'm more than happy to hang around and ask any other questions that you might have as well. So without further ado, I'm going to press on and tell you all about ghost fishing UK. Now, it's always worth defining the problem and the reason that ghost fishing UK exists. And essentially the problem is this, and you can find images like this on the internet quite easily, but the problem as you can see is of lost fishing gear. Lost fishing gear, once it's lost in the sea, it's still fishing gear. It doesn't know it's lost, so it can continue to catch animals, as you can see in the image there. So as you can see, animals get caught in this lost fishing gear, they die, they become bait for other animals. And you can see here there's fish landed, fish caught in the fishing net that can basically become bait, and more animals get attracted to it, and the cycle continues really. And this is just an unnecessary kind of causing of harm to marine life, and nobody likes to see that. There's a secondary problem with this, and that affects the fishing stock. So that fish that you see in the image will never be landed. It will never be on anyone's plate. And I think it's important at this point to stress something about all of us here at Ghost Fishing UK, is that we're very supportive of the fishing industry. We do not take the view that fishing gear is indiscriminately discarded at sea. Fishing nets, lobster pots, all of these things are forms of livelihood. These are the tools that the fishing industry needs to support itself. They cost a lot of money to buy them. So we take the view that nobody's throwing these things over the side just at random. It's a very harsh life working at sea, as we're all divers here. We know the sea can be a cruel mistress. So at the end of the day, we take the view that the fishing gear is accidentally lost or becomes snagged on wrecks and reefs around the coast. So we want to make that clear that we're not anti-fishing at all, and we want to help the fishing industry kind of fix this problem if we can. And as I say, the impact of lost fishing gear is right there, down from crabs and lobsters to fish to the bigger animals like seals, dolphins, and whales as well. So it really doesn't discriminate about what it catches. This is an image from a nylon net that we recovered, and it's absolutely, as you can see, full of spider crabs and crustaceans and all kinds of other animals that get tangled up in this. It takes us ages to cut them free, but quite often we can release them back into the wild again, which is obviously the preferred solution if possible. There's a lovely slide here from our friends at the Olive Ridley Project, and this really summarizes what happens when fishing gear gets lost at sea. So once it's lost, it can drift around on the tides and continue to catch animals. And as it catches animals, those animals die, the net sinks maybe, but it attracts more animals and it becomes free again. But we as divers tend to encounter it when it snags on reefs, and in the UK, particularly wrecks. Now, I learned to dive in the UK back in 1991, I think. And I very quickly, as you do, become a wreck diver. And it always struck me that, all the wrecks that I ever saw had some kind of fishing gear tangled up in them. And it just became the norm for me. And I just learned to look through the fishing net. And back in about 2014, I think, I was doing some work out in Croatia, and I came across a project that was working in one of my weeks off. And they asked me if I wanted to go and help them remove some fishing nets from a wreck that we dive all the time out there. And I thought, well, what better way to spend a week? And I did that, and I worked with that project, and it became clear to me that this project could be established over here in the UK, and there was plenty of work for us to do. So in 2015, we really set up Ghost Fishing UK. And the overall goals of our project are quite simply to locate, survey, and remove any ghost fishing or lost fishing gear, and if possible, recycle it. We want to educate the public on the problem of ghost fishing, which will help them to make more educated choices about the fish that they buy. We want, as we said before, to build links between the fishing community, divers, and other conservation and recycling organizations as well. It's this whole idea of a circular economy is the kind of buzzword for it at the moment. And what we're trying to do here is to make sure that all the different players in this system, the fishermen, divers, conservation groups, people that can recycle the plastic into something new, all talk to each other and share information, and hopefully then we can reduce the effect of this problem. And in order to do most of these objectives, we have to train divers to engage in this work. It's not a particularly pleasant activity, ghost fishing, removing fishing nets from wrecks. It's quite unnerving. Most of the time, a diver will want to swim away from a fishing net when they see it. But what our divers do is not only to swim towards it, but we interact with it, we touch it, we get up close and personal with that fishing net. So to us, it's really, really important that we train our divers so that they can operate safely and efficiently when they're working with fishing gear. So our very first project in the UK was up in Scapa Flow, and we got a team of divers together and we started building the team. And these was all divers that I knew very well, and I knew their capabilities. I'd probably been on projects with them before, so we could kind of work out exactly what it was that we needed to do. And in the first week, I think it was in 2015, we recovered something like 60 pots and creels from Scapa Flow, which, you know, this was a huge thing for us. We were staggered about how many pots were coming out. And we'd always seen them up in Scapa Flow, they were always there. But the more we looked, the more we found. And it's kind of the way it goes with ghost fishing. Every time I do a UK dive now, I see fishing gear, whereas before I said I kind of used to filter it out, but I see it everywhere I go now. So we took 60 pots out, and that was the start of the Ghost Fishing UK team. We were sponsored in that project very kindly by World Animal Protection. You can see an image of a net that was pulled up from the beach on the other side of Scapa there. We also started working very closely with Dr. Joe Porter at Heriot-Watt University. And Joe really helped us kind of be more quantitative about the work that we did. We've always thought it was important to survey the animals that were getting caught by the nets, the type of fishing gear that was being lost as well. Because if you're ever in a position to perhaps influence either a fishing industry or a governmental organization or anything like that, what you need is solid quantitative data, not just this impression that there's lots of fishing gear in the sea. We need to count the animals that are caught in the nets. What kind of animals were caught in the net? What kind of fishing net? How much of it? How much did it weigh? So Joe was very helpful in guiding us in that process and still engages with the project today. In 2016, this was our second visit to Scapa Flow, and we realized that we needed to formally start training our divers as well. And this is when our Ghost Fishing UK training course began to emerge. And we put together something pretty rudimentary in that week just to test it out. And we kind of flew by the seat of our pants on it, really, to be honest. But ultimately, we ended up with 6 or 7 more divers on our team than we had the year before. So the team begins to grow. And again, that week in Scapa Flow 2016, we took another 50 or 60 pots out of Scapa Flow. So Scapa was still giving up fishing gear on the second week we were up there. In 2017, we expanded quite significantly. We chartered 2 vessels. We had, it's not Classina, it was Houghton, Bob Anderson's Houghton boat. And we were with Helen and Hazel on Valkyrie as well. And so we doubled the number of people on it. We expanded the scope of the training course, and we brought more and more people in. And again, we took out some 60 pots and associated other rubbish as well. In 2018, we went up to 2 boats again, completely full boat this time, same 2 boats. And we began really to kind of sediment this team and really become a countrywide project. At the end of that week, it was very much slim pickings on the fishing gear that we were pulling out of Scapa Flow. We did eventually get 50 or 60 pots out, but they were getting really, really hard to find. So at the end of 2018, we made a statement that Scapa Flow was now clear of all lost or discarded fishing gear. It's a miserable kind of outlook for conservation at the moment, but I think that was a real positive story, and it's an unusual story in that it was a positive one. And this really spurred us on into expanding our work around the UK. So in summary, the data we collected about Scapa Flow project was we collected over 200 pots and creels, something like 3 kilometers of rope and shot line, quite a few dredges and the nets associated with them as well, batteries, hoovers, and all kinds of other rubbish that had been discarded in Scapa Flow over the years as well. And if you were up there for the 100-year anniversary and you are a regular Scapa Flow diver, hopefully you noticed that the presence of lobster pots particularly was much reduced. That's one of the scallop dredges coming back over the side up in Scapa, and another shot of more and more lobster pots and crab pots and hoovers and all kinds of other. There's an outboard motor in there as well. I don't know if you can see it just there. It wasn't a fresh loss, that one, I suspect. Towards the back there, you can see bits of the dredge frames and things like that, and there are whelk pots at the back. So there was all kinds of fishing gear, a cooker there that Jason's working on. So the range and variety of fishing gear was quite wide, but also the junk that had been thrown in over the years as well was quite spectacular. It was quite disturbing. A lot of the heavier things that we brought up in Scapa Flow were lead acid batteries, big truck batteries, and you can actually see one just there, the end of a big lead acid battery. And these were used as shot lines. So unfortunately, this is divers doing quite some significant part of the litter that was up in Scapa Flow. So it's a message for divers: we will find the stuff if you throw it in. Please don't use batteries for shot lines. As we started to work wider and wider, we realized that the MMO and the legislation around recovering things from the seabed was something we really needed to engage with a little bit more. When we were working in Scapa Flow, the legislation is slightly different there than it was down in the UK, down in England, sorry. So we had to engage with the Marine and Coastal Access Act, and we had to get method statements written and approved by Historic England, Natural England, and the Ministry of Defence. We used to have to apply for specific licenses to work on any particular site around England. Fortunately, after several interactions with the MMO over the years, the situation has now been changed. You still have to have method statements and everything like that, but instead of applying for a license for each site you want to work on, you can just work with an exemption notification. So it doesn't mean that you can randomly go around recovering fishing nets anymore. You're still coming under the Marine and Coastal Access Act, and you still need method statements and everything else approved by that, but you don't need to hold a specific license for removing ghost fishing gear anymore, which it makes our life a lot easier. But the hard work, the method statements and everything like that still need to be done. So our training course is something that often attracts a bit of attention, and it's a critical piece of what we do at Ghost Fishing UK. We're trying to expand the team, not because we want to be big, but because most of the team that are active at the moment are worn out. They're tired. It's the same people on the boats all the time. And you divers out there that run British-Sub-Aqua clubs, your own branches, you'll know that, it's that 80-20 rule. 80% of the work done in a branch is probably done by 20% of the people. And that's true in any organization and any group. And what we found is a similar kind of thing is true in Ghost Fishing UK. So we need to do more work. We need more divers. So we have a training program, and really the essence of this training program is bringing people into the team. And in order to do that, we have to have all those divers diving with a similar set of capabilities. because when we get onto a boat and we decide to do a survey or a fishing gear recovery project, every single diver has to be able to dive with every single other person on that boat. We may have to put teams together at kind of short notice. We may have to say that Billy has to dive with Dave when Billy doesn't normally dive with Dave, but we have to readjust teams to basically adapt to the conditions that we find on that wreck or reef. We need to make sure that the divers are capable, that they're not going to tangle themselves in the fishing net. So they need really good buoyancy control, good propulsion techniques, the ability to work as a team. And the teamwork thing to me is the most important thing. Our divers have to communicate well. They have to keep an eye on each other. They have to keep an eye on themselves. It's a step up from recreational diving, in my opinion. It's quite a big one as well. Most people can handle the equipment. They can do the skills that they need to do. Most people can squirt gas into a lifting bag. But at the end of the day, it's the teamwork and keeping everybody in that team safe, to me, is the most important thing. So what we do is we have 6 modules of theory, which go through some very basic kind of reminders of diving theory and gas management and that kind of thing. We look at the techniques you use to make a survey. So the kind of things you'd need to record, how you record animals, how you record fishing gear types, how you build a sketch and a map of the dive site so that we can use that information to build a plan for recovering that fishing gear. We talk about the general techniques of lifting and cutting fishing gear free of a wreck or a reef. And we put all this into practice over 3 days. So the first day is spent in the water, just working on basic skills, getting all the equipment tidy, making sure there's no danglies that are going to tangle up in fishing gear. The second day is spent surveying a site. So if we do it in a quarry, then we'll just put things into that quarry and people can go and survey those. If we're doing it out in the sea, then we'll have people do a proper survey on a particular dive site. We bring it back to the surface, we put it all together, we give them some feedback on how that survey works, whether they got good information, whether they can improve the way that they collect information. And on the third day, we get to grips with some very simple use of lifting bags and knives and cutting nets free and using ropes and that kind of thing. But most importantly, working as a team. So a ghost fishing lifting team is always a 3-person team. Now, most people are out in the kind of recreational diving world, when they hear about diving as a 3, they tend to assume that it's 2 divers plus 1 extra. But the way that we dive a 3 is very much not that. It's very much a 3 people within a team that all have kind of equal status, but they each have their own specific job to do. So on any one kind of lifting project, a lifting dive, one diver would be the active diver that has the lifting bag, that is cutting the net free of the wreck. The second diver will be observing and making sure that the active diver didn't become entangled in that net before it went to the surface. And the third diver is observing everything, the big picture, making sure that nobody else swims into kind of harm's way as before that net fires off to the surface, making sure that the number 2 person isn't themselves going to get entangled in the net. So and then we have to develop a communication system, which we either use through light signals, normal hand signals, or in the event of the visibility reducing, it has to go down to a touch communication system. And when you're removing fishing nets from wrecks, quite often the visibility does end up pretty horrible. Now, once we've gone through that relatively controlled training environment, what we then do is we bring all those divers out onto a live project with us. And you won't become a full team member until you've done that live project. Because the reason for that is we can simulate so much in a quarry or in a kind of basic training environment, but until you see the entire dynamic of how the whole team works, not just 2 or 3 divers, but the multiple teams that will have active in the water at any one time, the whole operation, how it works from front to back, the boat, working with the skipper, what happens to that net when it comes back to the surface. I think it's difficult for a new diver to kind of appreciate the entire process. So it's a big step up from recreational diving. The amount of teamwork involved, the new equipment, the big knives, the stage cylinders for inflating lifting bags. All of these things are very new for people. So we really think it's important that everybody goes through this process. So I wanted to say, I did want to say as much as I did on the training program, because I know club divers are very keen to get involved in this project. And I just wanted to kind of not warn you, but just say it's not as simple as it looks. There's quite a lot that goes into it. So hopefully you've got an appreciation for the kind of things that you need to be competent with before you start undertaking this kind of work. So Ghost Fishing UK is a registered charity now. We're very happy to have that status. It brings a lot more work and a lot more responsibility. There are 3 trustees, myself, Christine Grossart, and Fred Nunn. And as with all kind of formal organizations, we have an AGM every year. This is done at NDAC normally, and we have ours 14th of January this year down at NDAC again, along with a thing called our winter warmer, which is basically a meet and greet the team, which happens over that weekend as well. So if you're interested in meeting up with us and seeing what we do, then I think there are still some places on the winter warmer. You're more than welcome to come along and say hello and meet up with us. So we need to get bigger. I already said that. That's why we do the training, not only to keep us safe, but because we need to keep expanding. We have something like 80 members in total now. It's probably a little bit less than that. We've lost a few over the last couple of years, just through natural wastage, really. We have active teams in the southwest, the north, east, up in Scotland, and we draw from divers in the Midlands and London as well. We are trying. This has been a long-term goal of mine, to make these kind of cells of divers around the country. We're not quite there yet. We have a cell down in the southwest that's very quick to respond to reports of lost gear, and to some extent the northern teams do a very good job as well. But the more we can build teams of divers around the country, the quicker we can respond to reports of lost fishing gear, which makes us a much more efficient team as well. At the moment, mostly people have to drive for a couple of hours to get to a dive site. But if we can have a local team of divers that can respond to reports of ghost gear, then the whole job gets done a lot better, really. So a couple of things that we've done over the last, since our inception, really. We became a UK charity. We've done hundreds of survey dives, at least 50 recovery dives, probably more now. We've got over 700 diver hours in the water, 160 shellfish pots retrieved. I've done at least 4 or 5 this year, so we've probably got more like 40, 50 talks and events that we've attended and delivered. 31 training days. We've got 3 more next week coming up as well. So hopefully there's going to be 6 more ghost fishing divers on the team fairly soon as well. So we're a really busy, active project. And it's hard work, and we always need help. So if you do feel like joining up with us, do get in touch. We've always been supported by some very generous people and organizations around the dive industry. I've spoken already about Heriot-Watt University. We are delighted to have a recent collaboration with Ocean Plastic Pots, which I'll talk about in a minute. They take not monofilament, they take polypropylene rope and they turn it into flower pots. The Sea Life Trust that run the London Aquarium, they also do the seal sanctuary down in Gweek in Cornwall. They've sponsored us before on some projects. Fourth Element are always super helpful for us. Dive Signs that make the stickers, Mark's always been very helpful to us. PARALENZ used to give us free cameras, which we were very grateful for. HALCYON Dive Systems make the lifting bags for us, and they are incredibly supportive. We couldn't have got to where we got to without the support of HALCYON as well. And others, too numerous to mention, really. We're always really grateful for our supporters that help us get to where we get to. There's a big question that anybody that engages in this kind of work needs to answer before they start bringing fishing gear back to the surface again. What are you going to do with it when you get it to the surface? It's a tricky question. You could just send it to landfill, but I have this horrible vision of the future where there's groups similar to Ghost Fishing UK in 200 years' time digging up landfill sites and look at all the terrible things that have been hidden in landfill. So landfill to me is an absolute last resort for the stuff that we pull out of the sea. We are really working so hard to try and find different avenues to recycle, retask this fishing gear. Now, the ultimate perfect solution is if we get told about the gear quickly enough, we can pull it out of the sea and give it back to the fishing community. That, to me, is the ideal solution. Remember, we said that the fishermen are not losing stuff deliberately. They're not wantonly throwing fishing gear into the sea. This is how they make their livelihood. So if they can get it back and not buy net parts, then that has to be a good solution. So that's always our first option. Now, sometimes that gear is in such a bad state that it can't really be recycled, in which case we need to look at, sorry, it can't be used again. So we need to look towards recycling solutions. Now, ocean plastic pots, I just mentioned. Ali Mitchell is a commercial diver, and he did a job where he came across just so much. He had to do a cleanup on a ship that had sunk or something, and there was just hundreds of tons of pieces of plastic. And he thought, this is terrible. There must be something we can do with all the lost plastic in the sea. And he started collecting polypropylene and turning it into flower pots. And I'll show you a picture of them in a minute. But he's won awards at the Chelsea Flower Show and all kinds of things. So Ali takes basically our polypropylene output. There's a chap up in Orkney, and he runs a company called Afraid Not, and that's the image in the background there. And he takes all these old ropes, all the old shot lines, all the ropes that you get that are attached to fishing nets and lobster pots, the string ropes and all that kind of thing, and he leaves it in his garden for a year, and then he puts it through an old industrial washing machine. I think his wife got fed up with him putting it through the domestic one, so he's got his own proper washing machine now, and he cleans up the ropes, and he does this beautiful knotting work, and he makes doormats, door stops. We've got a door stop and a doormat here at home, and basically it's really lovely gear made out of old ropes, any old rope, really. It's fantastic stuff. Look him up he's on Facebook. He's called Afraid Not. There's a company over in the Netherlands called Bracenet, and they take fishing net, chop it all up into pieces, and make beautiful bracelet jewelry. They're kind of 20 quid a bracelet, but we sell them on our website, and they absolutely fly off our shelves. People love these things, because these are made from fishing nets. So rather than that fishing net floating around in the sea, you then wear it on your wrist, and it's a nice story to tell anyone that asks about it. We are forever sending pieces of fishing net to artists and actors and things like this. They want it for set decoration. They want to make art installations with it. Schools and universities want it for various science projects and to kind of highlight the problem of ghost fishing. They want to analyze the plastic. They want to do all kinds of things with it, microplastic studies and things like that. So we have lots and lots of small avenues for recycling our fishing nets, and we continue to look for more. We're really looking for a really big kind of way of getting rid of hundreds of kilos of stinking fishing net. So if anyone knows what I can do with a couple of 100 kilos of stinking fishing net, please let me know. So this is Ali of ocean plastic pots swimming around in a sea of nasty plastic stuff there. We've got one of our divers there is collecting some polypropylene rope, which will go into becoming these things, these ocean plastic pots, these lovely green colored plant pots. And he presented these, or he exhibited these at the Chelsea Flower Show, and I think he won a very significant award for kind of environmentally aware new products at the Chelsea Flower Show, which is some accolade, to be honest. And basically he can't get enough polypropylene now, so we need more divers to go and collect more polypropylene. We do a lot of kind of media outreach, a lot of media work. We've been on the One Show, so we've had people come down, film us. Most of the projects that we do attract at least the local television kind of channels now, and more the national stuff is starting to pick us up. We often get a piece in like a Sunday paper and stuff like that on a big size project we do. So there's a demand for this sort of project. The general public love what we do. They really lap it up when they hear about it. We do a lot of outreach work while we're doing major projects, and generally the engagement from the general public is incredible. This is all pre-COVID now, so the year before COVID came, it's like it's kind of a funny way of looking at life, but it must have been 2019. We ran a week down in Cornwall, and we deliberately went on the August bank holiday weekend, which is generally a time to stay away from Cornwall if you're a diver. But we went down there with the specific intention of not only going to recovering a fishing net from, but also to engage with the public. We went to the seal sanctuary, we did beach cleans, we did all kinds of kind of meet the public events, and just the feedback we got was spectacular. The public have no idea what's beneath the surface of the sea. They just assume that it's some kind of brown liquid that nothing lives in. But then they go and eat fish and chips for tea. Now, when you start to show them what's beneath the surface, it's like when you go to work on a Monday morning and you tell people that you've been scuba diving in England, and they look at you like you're insane. You said you can't dive in this country, but we know you can. We know that there's a beautiful environment beneath the surface. We also know that it's under threat from fishing gear as well and other things. So this process of education is critically important to get the public to understand what goes on beneath the surface of the sea. And the way I look at it is scuba divers are in a completely unique position to do that. Nobody else can see what we see. Nobody else can go to the places that we go to. So it comes with a responsibility, if you're a scuba diver, to me, to try and protect and preserve that environment if there's any way that you can do that. And that's the way I've always approached this kind of work. Is diving gives me so much. It's given me a career. It's given me my living and breathing hobby. It's the only thing I'm really interested in these days, to be honest. And this conservation work is my kind of the price that I pay, if you like, my gift back to that environment that's given me so much. So this was just coming through the project that we did down in Cornwall. Now we got something like 800 kilos of fishing net in that week, and that's just a small part of it there before it all got bagged up. So an absolute colossal amount of trawl gear, monofilament is in there as well. There's polypropylene for Ali's pots. The amount of gear that we pulled out in just a week's work was phenomenal, really spectacular. And yeah, the usual seal caught in a rope. We were talking to the Sea Life Centre, the seal sanctuary down in Cornwall, and they were saying that the seals, funnily enough, you always see a seal playing with a ball. Well, a seal doesn't know the difference between a ball and a float buoy. So they quite often go and play around the nets because they like playing with the floats on the top, and then they get tangled up in the ropes and the lines and the nets. And the seal sanctuary does a great job of rescuing them and rehabilitating them when they can. And like I said, we did a couple of days at the seal sanctuary as the public kind of walked past our stands and spoke to us. I did perhaps one of the most rewarding things I've ever done as a scuba diving instructor. I took this little chap in a pool, and this is you can find him on Instagram. I'll not give his real name away. He's called Mini Beach Cleaner. Go and see him on Instagram. He basically, his life goal is to collect as much plastic and rubbish off of beaches as he possibly can. So all his time off, he spends trawling beaches and picking up plastic, and he makes beautiful pieces of artwork with it, and he tells stories on Instagram with it. And he's always kind of followed what we did at Ghost Fishing UK. So I thought it would be really nice to pop him in a pool, have him swim around for a bit, and do a survey and play with a lifting bag, all in water deep enough to kneel up in. So it was in no danger. But he had a wonderful day, and we took him out on the boat and showed him what we did. And again, it's one of the most nicest things I've ever done as a scuba diver, I think. So what can you guys do? How can you get involved in this project? Well, on our website, which is www.ghostfishing.co.uk, you'll find all kinds of useful things. What the most important to us is our report page. Now, you can report anything that you see. If you go scuba diving and you see a fishing net tangled up on a wreck or a reef, just report it. You don't need a full scientific survey. You tell us where it was, even if it's just the name of the wreck. That's good enough. We can do the rest. Tell us what you saw. And if it's net tangled around the bow, that's okay. If you want to go into more detail with it, and you want to tell us what kind of net it was, how much you think it weighed, how long it was, what depth it was at, that's all good. We'll take as much information or as little as you can provide. I think there is a way of submitting a photograph to it, or maybe just a checkbox that you can click. Google's kind of funny with uploading images unless you're a Google account holder. But basically, if you do shoot a bit of GoPro video or something like that, we'll probably, if you can't upload it, we will come and find it from you. Just tag a note in there. Basically, this goes into our database and it gives us hotspots that we can then focus on. And we have got so many of the reports that we get through this this reporting system lead into quite significant projects for us to go and recover nets. You are more than welcome to crew on our boats. If you just want to come and see what we do, we always need people in wellies with a seriously good sense of humor to help us haul stuff out of the water and back onto the deck, fish your way through it, and throw all the live animals back in again, count them, count the dead ones, throw those back in as well again, and then help us bag it all up and move it around. So if you fancy that, we will welcome you with open arms. You can sign up to be a diver as well. We are desperately trying to deliver more training courses, and we will ask you about your experience, your kind of skill level, the equipment that you normally use, and we will send you an email and tell you that there is a course running and invite you to apply. You can do the usual social media stuff. We have a newsletter that goes out every couple of weeks, some stories in that, which is always a nice way of finding out what we're doing and the kind of ideas that we're having. Follow us on social media. We have a wonderful woman called Dolly who puts a huge stream of social media out for us, and it really does help us kind of tell the story, not just to divers, but to the wider world as well, about what we do and the problems that are beneath the surface. So that's how you can kind of interact with us, get involved with what we do. Now, this is our report a ghost fishing net sign, a ghost gear sighting, basically. I'll not go through the whole form with you. It's a very simple Google account, but just you can find it on the website, fill in the details as much as you can, in as much detail as you can, and away you go. And we will put that in our database and we'll go get it. And if we're doing a really good job, we'll tell you if we manage to recover it or not. Don't worry if your friends have already put that data in. We would like duplicates, actually. The more duplicate records we get of a particular net, what that means is we get a view of it from a different side. We get more information in each report, different information in each report. So it builds a picture. And again, if 10 divers have seen a net, it's a much more reliable account of the presence of that net or lobster pot or whatever. So please you can all do it. Everybody, just write what you saw and send it in. We'll be incredibly grateful, and it will help us. It will help us, and it will help that net not be there, hopefully, when you go and dive that site again.
Rich, just to interested, there's a question come in.
Yeah, sure.
Firstly, thank you about how interesting it is, but they want to ask the question, how much time do you spend finding somewhere for your gear to be recycled, and how do you store the material while you're awaiting recycling opportunity?
Anybody from DEFRA here? So basically, we have a secret location in a field somewhere in the southwest of England where there is a big pile of fishing net. So that it lives there, and it drains, and it dries out, and it becomes kind of more manageable and smells less. Ultimately, I did have 2 bags of it on my front yard for all of August 2020, I think, and it stank. So we put it in an out the way field where it's not going to harm anybody and nobody really cares it's there. Then it goes out to, basically our biggest effort at the moment is getting that gear out to suitable recycling pathways. Now, Ali takes the polyprop stuff. The other stuff, the monofilament net and those kind of things, are more problematic. There is no current recycling facility in the UK that can deal with ghost nets. There are places that will deal with end-of-life nets, essentially clean nets. But actually, very, very few places, even worldwide, will deal with ghost nets that have been in the sea for any length of time. We do have an experimental process going on with a company that are playing around with the net that we've sent them. So far, it's work. I've got about a 90% success rate, I would say, with how that net goes through their machine and turns into smashed up pieces of fiber, basically. So at the moment, it's held and stored, and every time our kind of potential company needs a bit more for testing, you know, a few 100 kilos of it goes up to them, and they play around with it more and break their machine a bit more, but get better at what they do. So this is actually a serious problem for us. And if anybody has any idea about how you can help us with this, please get in touch with me. It's a big logjam for us at the moment. Does that answer the question?
I haven't seen a follow-up, Rich. It's interesting. I noticed on your website and in your pictures, everyone's open circuit. You've obviously got a reason for that. Would you like to, it says at the moment you don't allow CCA divers in your teams.
We don't know. We tried. I played around with my rebreather in the early days. Rebreathers are a fantastic tool for kind of gas logistics, as any rebreather diver already knows. I was quite strong on the way the teamwork worked. Now, in our teams, we accept kind of any denomination of diver. I don't care who trained you. You just got to be a decent diver and get on with the team. And that means they come from very different backgrounds. But we all need to be able to work as a team, which you need kind of an equivalent knowledge for how your teammates are diving. Now, the problem with rebreathers is that you lose that equipment familiarity, not with yourself, but with the team. And what essentially the only conclusion I would come to would be that rebreather divers would have to dive with other rebreather divers. So we would lose any kind of element of a standardization. Well, we don't formally standardize equipment in the project, but essentially it's open circuit. It doesn't matter what, with the exception of a few things. Basically, open circuit gear is very familiar to most people. So I've just seen a question pop in. Does the same apply for side mount? We do allow side mount, but nobody does. So make of that what you will. So basically, it's not so much the problem with the rebreather, it's how it integrates into the team that causes us the biggest kind of headache. Now, we are fortunate that there is still a ton of work in the shallower than 30-meter range that we tend to find ourselves in. There are so many wrecks with fishing net on them that rebreathers do not really become required. I would argue that the further past 30 meters you go, the more significant advantage a rebreather will bring to the project. So I'm not saying never, but I am saying not now. Give us time. Let's get all the nets out from 30 meters, and then we'll have another think about it.
Okay, thanks for that. Sorry to interrupt your talk. Keep going.
Not at all, not at all. All right, so coming towards the back end of it now, really. And I thought what I'd start doing is just showing you what we've been doing over the last year or two, because it's been a funny couple of years. So 2020, COVID came, and obviously for the first kind of bits of that, there was nothing going on. We couldn't dive, everything was in lockdown. But as things started to open up, we began going out ghost fishing again. We still had all the reports from before. We had a whole bunch of plans in 2020 that most of which kind of didn't reach fruition, but we did get out and start working again. We had to employ different strategies on the boat. So everybody had to have masks, and the whole social distancing thing went. We could only put 6 divers on a boat in our first release. But we still got out there. We were still recovering fishing nets when we were permitted. So the show went on, really, which I'm very pleased about, just at a slightly slower pace than we'd have hoped. And we couldn't pull as much net because we couldn't have as many divers on the boat as we liked. We kept finding stuff, just more kind of pretty pictures, if you like, of animals caught in traps and things. We started towards the end of 2020 thinking that what we really wanted to do was to start moving east down the English Channel. We were getting loads and loads of reports from that way, and much of the time we didn't have an active team down there, and we basically weren't able to get there effectively. So it became one of our goals for 2021 to actually get down to that eastern end of the channel and start pulling nets out from the wrecks around there. There's loads and loads of wrecks. There's loads and loads of fishing gear all over it. So we were keen to get down there, do some survey, pull the crabs out, release the animals. And you can see us starting to do that there. This was a project in Plymouth, I think, when this huge gill net had been reported lost off the Eddystone, I think, if I'm getting this picture right. So yeah, 2021, again, we had lots of projects down in Plymouth. We started to get a really good interaction there from the local MMO office, and they started to get reports of lost fishing gear. You know, fishermen were saying we'd lost a net off the Eddystone, and the MMO don't have the tools to deal with this, but they've begun talking to us now and asking us if we can deploy and go and pull this net out, which I think, from my perspective, is an incredibly big step. When the MMO is calling us to kind of recover fishing nets, that means we're getting somewhere. We're actually making an impact, not at the fishing level, at the governmental level. And it's a big, to me, it's like a signal that we're doing things properly. We did start to work down towards the eastern end of the channel. You may know this channel diver boat. Steve, the skipper down there, is absolutely all over ghost fishing. We arrived for, I think, our first project down there, and he'd already had banners around the top of his wheelhouse, all made up with Ghost Fishing UK logos. He's supported us really, really well. He knows where the fishing gear is. He knows the diving out here, so he always puts us on a good site. He's good with the tides. He's a great skipper. We have a great collaboration down in Brighton now going on with Sussex Wildlife Trust. We're kind of giving them information about the fishing gear that we're recovering. They're kind of giving us a platform through their social media feeds, and we're helping them with materials and things like that. So again, it's another really good collaboration. We are working down that end of the channel now quite a lot. We must have done at least six trips, 2-day trips down in Brighton this year, even all around the COVIDs and the lockdowns. It's a repeat picture. And so basically, we have been pulling fishing gear out right through the COVID pandemic, albeit at a lower rate. We haven't done as much training as we like, so our numbers have depleted a little bit. We're getting back onto the training now. I'm up to Cape and Ray next week, teaching Monday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, a new crop of ghost fishing divers. And we are pretty much ready to go for 2020. We're setting ourselves up. Our operations officer, Fred, you saw in a previous picture, he's starting to book boats for the 2022 season. So we are excited to get going. So the final thing I want to say is something that's happening next week. And it's a go for your pockets time, I'm afraid. Every year we run a campaign called the Big Give Christmas Challenge. And this is one of our biggest fundraisers of the year, and it is really, really significant for us, because the way it works is over the summer we approach companies, individuals, all sorts of things, all sorts of people like that, to pledge money to our project. And what happens then is next week, so the first week of December, basically, we ask the public for donations. And essentially, if we get enough donations from the public to match a certain amount, all the pledges engage. So we get basically a 2-to-1 leverage on the donations. And if we achieve that, there is a kind of an extra pot of money we can apply for, which gives us full matched funding from the Big Give organization itself. So we get effectively another third of that money. So it's potentially, for every pound that the public donate next week, we can potentially get an extra £2 on top of that. So that £1 becomes 3, if I've got that right. So that's happening next week. So if you are in any way inclined to support the work we do, I'll be very grateful if you hold off on the donations until 30th of November. You will see the stream of social media that will come out from us. Apologies for that, but it will keep us running for the next year. So that's basically a little bit of a plug of what's going on next week. And thank you to you all for your attention and your time. These are our social media channels, but you can find it all through ghostfishing.co.uk, all the reporting schemes, how to sign up as a diver or a surface volunteer, how to donate through the big give. It's all linked through our webpage. So it's all there if you want to engage with us. And I will happily take any more questions that you'd like to ask now.